Well, the problem with narcissistic parents, it's always all about them. Right? So even now it's all about them, right? So it's not like you need something. It's like, oh shit, it's my parents, I shouldn't, I'm a bad daughter, this isn't okay, right? So it's still about them. And the thing is, there's two extremes, right? On one end, we can say, fuck them, right? You don't need to be, privy to whatever the hell is going on. That would be one extreme end. The other extreme end is, oh, get over yourself. These are your parents. You have to love them till they die, right? And so most people who have, well, anyone with parents really, right, swings between those two extremes. Most people don't have narcissistic parents, but some people do, or some people have other, like there's lots of parental imprints that are not healthy, right? From benign neglect to extreme, narcissism or borderline behavior or whatever. So the key there is to essentially go, not can you forgive them or not? Of course you can, right? Forgiveness isn't the thing. The thing is it healthy for you to be exposed to them? That's the only question there. It's not what's right or wrong, but is your nervous system and your psyche and your emotional well-being helped or harmed by having contact with them? That's the only consideration for yourself, is can I be with my parents without it causing me harm? If the answer is no, then it's not time yet. If the answer is not really, but there are certain things I could do if I set proper boundaries, then that's another conversation, right? So let's say somebody gets sick, right? And now you have to make a decision. Are you going to visit them in the hospital or not? And for most of us, as parents get older, that can happen. So then you have to go. It's something like, the decision tree is something like, how serious is this? If something happens, i.e. somebody dies or is severely, incapacitated, will I be able to live with not having gone? Right? That's the second decision tree. The next decision tree then is it more harmful for me to go or not go? Right? Then based on that, you go, okay, if I really think about it, probably for the rest of my life, I'm going to somehow beat myself up for not having gone. So I will go, and then you'll go, okay, how can I go without getting harmed? Right? And then you make the decisions around how to do that best. Take a friend or a partner along. You go with a sibling who is equally attuned to what's not okay and what's okay. You have your therapist on speed dial, whatever, right? So you do what you can do with a very specific thing, and you go, okay, I will go for an hour, I will only do X because that I can sustain, then I'm going to go home, deal with what that is, work it out, move on, right? So these are your decisions. The things to guard against, which every child of a narcissist has, is your martyr, your inner martyr. You know what martyr means, right? Der Märtyrer. Yeah. Also derjenige, der sich opfert. Yeah. So your inner martyr is going to come online because you were born and bred to be a, let's say, energy infusion. Right? Certain personality profiles feed off other people's energy. And so if your parents fed off your energy, then you maintaining your own energy profile and circuitry is your prime learning experience. And then when you no longer essentially open your veins to give your parents blood, then you can interact with them again. But you're going to feel like you must give of yourself for them to be happy. You know, because essentially that's what you were raised for. So I'd say only have contact when you sustainably can have contact without the energy being pulled out of you. You know. If you have to have contact, then you have to have protocols to protect your energy up front and then replenish your energy after. Does their father have decent parents? Okay, so you can show intergenerational living there. You don't have to do it with your parents. No. So, like I said this very casually. My grandmother was batshit crazy. Her batshit craziness was the result of very severe war trauma, right? So there was a reason for it, but nonetheless, in my family, who was very big on intergenerational, with holidays and summer vacations, and like there was a lot of that happening, because that was a very high value to both of my parents, who were single children because they were born in the war. I was essentially modeled that you had to suck it up around your elders, right? Which I understand why it happened, because it was definitely a lot easier to just like take your hands off the wheel till the situation passed and then re-engage when my grandmother had de-escalated. She had very severe PTSD, which now we know that, but of course back then nobody knew that. Now I mean, we laugh about it now, my dad and I, because it's so textbook, right? She's long dead now, but it's like, it's like you could open a textbook and you'd go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, right? And that was the upswing of my psychology training, that eventually I could go to my parents and say, listen, people, this has rhyme and reason, and we can deal with this. But by then my parents had figured out how to deal with it, which is to essentially drop it, right? It just wouldn't engage. And she'd spin and spin till she de-escalated herself. And then when she had de-escalated, everybody would like just move along. But that was not good messaging for me personally, when looking back, that essentially she, everybody just went like, whoa, okay, all right, so you don't necessarily need to pass that on to your children. No. You can say, it's a bit difficult right now, it's not the best thing, or whatever. I don't know how old your kids are, and or just not do it, but do it where it's appropriate. Yeah. These are tough things, right? Because once again, also, when we talk about your narcissistic parents, what we're talking about is your perception of your parents, right? And your imprints. And somebody else might have totally different imprints, towards them. But then, of course, there's also stuff that's just irrefutable. So my sister, who's 4.5 years younger than me, has a radically different relationship to my parents than I do. To the point that when I hear her talk, I'm like, where the fuck did you grow up? What happened in those 4.5 years that I left home already, right? It's like, it's so stark. But we come in with lessons we have to learn, and we come in with imprints, and we receive imprints, and they're very different. So all you can do is care for yourself. You can't care, for generations to come unless you can care for yourself. There's only one way to find out, and that is to see what you could do with the grief. Right? So if it's a pattern, the pattern is something like grief is, let's see how I can say this. so it makes sense. So typically we only grieve for things we love, right? Things we don't really care about, we don't grieve about, right? And this goes from the tiniest little things like you drop a glass to whatever, right? If I drop this glass, I'm not going to be grief-stricken, right? I mean, hopefully not, right? But if it's a glass that is the last remaining glass of my grandmother, because, you know, whatever, all the other stuff burned. So I have one glass left of my grandmother. If that glass would shatter, I would feel strong grief. I mean, it's not for the glass per se, but it's for that last memory of my grandmother, who I loved, the other grandmother, the Viennese grandmother, who I loved very much and lived with for a while and everything, right? So, and I have this very deep connection with her that feels very ancient. So if I would drop that glass, I would have strong grief. But it's not the glass, obviously, because anybody could look at me and go, why are you so upset? It's just a material item. She lives in your heart, you know, all the shit people said to me when my house burned down, right? But what it is that glass, like many items for us, is a portal into the love, right? The memory, the love. So you were separated or abandoned in various ways by people for whom you had love and wanted to be loved by, right? But weren't, you know, or weren't anymore because they were gone. You know, both, you had both, I know, right? So what that is it's unrequited love, so to speak. Right? And so that makes perfect sense when you look at people grieving, right? They grieve for things they love. But what can, of course, happen is that grief becomes the love, right? Because you didn't get the love, you only got the grief, so to speak. And so you're grieving the fact that you didn't get the love. So your grief becomes your love. And then it's very hard to step off the grief, because that's the only love you know. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll leave it there so that you can just allow yourself to feel that. We'll talk about how to pull out of the grief nosedive into transforming that into something else, right? But and so you can test what your grief is about by seeing if you can transform it. The nature of opening your heart is opening, closing, opening, closing, opening, closing. That's like day and night, day and night. It's a gym, but also it's normal. In the tantric traditions, they call it spanda, pulse, right? And everything has a pulse, including the actual pulse of our heart, but also the proverbial, like the metaphysical heart has an opening and a closing. And as long as you are human and you feel emotions and you feel openness and then you feel fear about being hurt and then you're worried that you're going to get abandoned and then you close a bit but then you open again because you want to love, that's the human condition. And the reason you see these icons, you see them in Christianity, of course, very prominently, but they exist in other depictions too, where you see the open heart, right? As a kid, I would always call it Jesus with the open heart surgery, because we had a surgeon in the family. So that thing, right, where the heart is exposed. Well, that's how it goes. It's like it feels very vulnerable. And you're definitely not going to want to do it all the time. And the saint, the saintly Jesus, Saint Hanuman, for instance, in the Hindu tradition, has the open heart. It's the sign for somebody who's willing to keep their heart open no matter how horrendous it goes. Now, that's not to be confused with martyrdom, because that's keeping your heart open to be abused because you think that that's what's necessary. And very often these two are conflated. You hear these kind of tantric tropes of keep your heart open regardless of how much it hurts. That's inviting abuse, right? The more refined thing is that the saint, so to speak, meaning the exalted being that is no longer attached to the outcome, can keep their heart open because the outcome isn't the thing that's required, right? But when you look at the depictions of saints, they always have this beatific but also incredibly pained expression on their face, because that's what it is. You love something, you know you're going to lose it. That's just, that comes together. Anything you've ever loved will at some point be gone, either by you dying, them dying, something else happening. There's no way out of it. So love and loss are intricately connected, and love and grief are intimately connected, and that produces the pulse, right? And so there's nothing wrong with the pulse at all. It's just a matter of distinguishing. There's a lot of fine slices behind that. One of the areas of inquiry is, are you martyring yourself in order to keep your heart open, or are you saintly, right? And typically when we have self-interest in keeping the heart open, it's martyrdom. While if it just happens because you can't, but then it's this more saintly thing, so to speak, right? So that's one line of inquiry, is how much martyrdom do you have in your in your wantingness to keep your heart open at all times, right? But if your heart is open at all times, how would you know the difference anyway, right? So there has to be that spanda, so to speak. The other thing, of course, that's a line of inquiry is essentially when is it appropriate to open your heart towards someone and when is it not? And how do you determine what that is? And so that opening and closing is a very important and, as a matter of fact, fundamental tool of inquiry as to the human condition, right? And so that's something that you track so you can see where you're at, you know. So it's all good. Yes, it's all good.